was right behind Mr. Moss. We're all leaving the same.
Are we good to go? Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Apologies to those of you who are here with us, and thank you for being with us. Between trains, maybe planes and automobiles, there was a little bit of a delay, but we are all here now and grateful to be here. I am going to just take a moment to give a shameless plug to everyone who is here in the room and hopefully who's watching online to participate. Hopefully you have heard that we have just launched a survey for our strategic plan, but instead of me talking about it, I'm going to turn it over to our students to do that for us.
Hi, we're third graders in your school district, Savannah Chatham County Public Schools.
And we're thinking about our futures, like what school will be like when we're bigger.
Big plans don't work unless everyone helps make them.
That means families,
Teachers and staff,
Community members and students too.
your voice matters. When you share your ideas, you help challenge what's not working.
and build schools that help all kids shine.
Please take the survey and have a hand in shaping our future.
Because our future starts with you.
So if that does not inspire you to take our, so that's all right. Let's. I just love that video. So kudos to our communications team and thank you to the students who participated because that's what it's all about. So.
And as of this morning, we had over 800 participants, and it just
Wow.
launched yesterday at noon.
Wow.
Yes.
That is fantastic. So please, it's open for, I think, for 2 weeks. So spread the word, take the survey. Anybody in the
Everybody.
community, you do not have to have kids in the system. Hopefully you live in Chatham County. But we would love for our business partners to partake in it. Any community member, we need all the diverse voices to be represented in that survey. Okay, and today, obviously, we are here for the Academic Excellence Committee meeting. We heard a little bit of a teaser during our recent board meeting about some of what we are going to hear today. So Dr. Watts, do you have any opening comments you would like to
As
make?
I invite Dr. Barnes up to the mic, I just want to create a little bit of an arc of a story because these committee meetings can sometimes feel siloed and unrelated. So I would invite everybody to think back to last week's meeting on finance. Because a lot of what you're going to hear today is actually a part of the arc of that story. Our work around finance is critically important, and we're putting a lot of focus there because we see our finance work as being an enabler of academic achievement. So they go hand in hand. And we want to be sure that as you listen today and you think about the finances of the district, you are thinking about that alignment to instructional priorities. Now, we just don't align to align. We've got this other piece embedded in that we refer to as return on investment. That's certainly a strategy that we're working towards that is guiding the path. But what we're hoping to show you today is a return on your investment, where we're beginning to see traction, where the board invested dollars last year, and what we're beginning to see in terms of outcomes as it relates to our employees, our teachers, our leaders, and most importantly, our students. And this will also kind of prepare you for maybe some mid-year adjustments that I will be coming forth with in the next board meeting, because there are some areas that we need to expand. We're already seeing a strong return on investment. I don't necessarily think we need to wait until next school year. Let's keep the momentum and spread that across as many students that we can impact as possible this year. So with that said, I'm excited to turn the presentation over to Dr. Raymond Barnes, who is over leadership and supports instruction. I'm surprised his partner is not up there with them because usually where you see one, you see the other. And that is by design. But this is certainly a collaboration between the two of them and their partnership and alignment between their two departments. So with that said, I am excited to turn it over to Dr. Barnes.
Before we jump in, just a couple of quick items of business to take care of real quickly. Approval of the agenda,
Yes, that's
second, All in favor? We also have the minutes from both August and November of last year to approve, so we'll do August 22nd. Do I have a motion? So moved by Ms. Campbell. All in favor? And approval of the minutes for November 19th. Motion by Ms. Hall, second by Ms. Campbell. All in favor? All right. Dr. Barnes. Yes, ma'am.
I was saying to ladies that I sent a note out today that maybe we should try as board members to hold our questions and comments until you do the presentation so we actually get to hear the whole thing.
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
I also hope that I don't break my.
I have to say, when I saw that, I was like, All right, Ms. Hall, I'm going to keep you to it. All right. We are going to try, so write down your questions, and Dr. Barnes, we're going to try and give you the floor and not interrupt you.
Thank you. So, good afternoon. Yeah, so Mr. Butler and I, they see us as Batman and Robin, but I do want to acknowledge he and his division of Office of Instructional Excellence that weighed in the development of this presentation. So there may be moments in which members of his team may chime in to answer any questions that provide clarity and context. So thank you to Mr. Butler and his division. I want to start off by acknowledging the hard work that our leaders are doing. They're doing a significant amount of intentional work around building capacity of leaders and of teachers for a better outcome for kids. And what I'm going to talk about today, it was an intentional effort as the district to tighten up some things, but it took a lot for our leaders to sunset some practices and adopt a new way of thinking or a different way of thinking. And I want to acknowledge the hard work that they have put into the game to get us to where we are today. So why leadership and instructional coaching? It is a piece of a bigger puzzle, but it's a vital piece to ensure that all of the strategic plan, all the efforts, all the KPIs that we're going out there, that we're developing people to get to that point. And so when we look at it from our previous form as a school district, it is to improve student outcomes. It is part of the continuous improvement process that we have launched in our district to ensure that what we're doing, we look at those results, look at those outcomes, we circle back, we coach around it, we set new goals, new data points, and we continue to get better. It serves as an intentional effort to support and retain staff. We know that it's just not all compensation that makes people stay in an organization. It's how we invest into their professional development. Everybody wants to be great at the job that they are hired to do and are assigned to do. And so this is our opportunity to invest into people, develop their skill set, develop their capacity so they can be great in their assigned roles. And then also what we have launched as a school district is to make sure we are creating systems for sustainability and alignment, which is very important that we have aligned systems that go from the school board, superintendent's office, all the way to the classroom. And so we want to make sure we have those aligned systems. When we launched this work earlier this year, we were going after three things, and we wanted to be very intentional around our focus. We wanted to create the conditions in which how we support teachers to advance student learning. The conditions in which we create determines how well students thrive. So we wanted to make sure that we're focused on creating the right rigorous conditions in the classroom, also around the right management conditions so that students can be engaged at a higher level and do the things that teachers are asking them to do. We want to establish a culture of coaching, not a culture of evaluation, but a culture of coaching from the central office level, the division chief, all the way to the classroom. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that looks. And then lastly, we were going out there creating a comprehensive system so that we can remove this idea around a system of schools to more of a school system where we have a common approach for coaching. We use common language. We're using common resources, looking at common data points, and we're also documenting our practice and our progress in a centralized way. which sets us up to be able to determine what we're doing well, where we need to get better, and if we're actually moving the dial. In order to make all of that happen, it was a shift in practice. There were a lot of great things going on, and there's still a lot of great things going on in our school district. Coaching was happening across different schools, but it was different approaches as to how that coaching took place. Academic coaches were used in various ways. I remember we sat in a retreat one time, and the question was asked, how do we develop academic coaches? Some are being used more as mini assistant principals, others being used as filling in, the gap when a teacher is out. And so we wanted to make sure that we start looking at where we want to shift to. And there was limited development there. So if you look at the right side of the screen, that is the desired state that we are moving to. We want to make sure we had consistent feedback and protocols across all schools, making sure that we define the roles and responsibilities of the academic coaches so they can have maximum impact on the instruction. So we can really remove all those other managerial things away that they may have been involved in, but focus on the core thing and developing teachers to advance student outcomes. Looking at the same data sets. We can always get a result, but if we got to make sure we all going after the same result, looking at the same data processes and engaging in the same coaching methodology. Oftentimes in school districts, and we observe this here, is sometimes that the academic coach, a lot is put on that person's shoulder, but we have not invested as much as we should have in their development and their skill set. And so they're going from being a strong classroom teacher to now being a teacher of an adult. And so we got to make sure we develop them to be able to do that. And so investing in their development was a huge aspect of the work that we launched this year. And then also standardizing those systems for documenting so that we want to move away from Google Drive, capturing things in Teams, but put everything in one system where it's transparent, that we can all look at it with the same eye, but also once a coach gives feedback to the teacher, that teacher can see that data point and what that feedback is that was given to them in a transparent way. Nothing is hidden. There are no I got you games. And that is very important for a coaching relationship. That removes the barriers and this idea that I'm being evaluated, but there's an investment for me to get better. The theory of action. So I talked about this, creating this scenario where the coaching happens from the chief's office down to the classroom. And when we look at the theory of action, this is what we do as an adult. If we foster leadership excellence, we demonstrate a belief in student potential. We think about those instructional systems that we have, and we put those things in place. And we create this supportive learning environment and implement systems thinking. Then what we are going after, we stand a better chance of having sustainable excellence in our classrooms. We're ensuring higher student outcomes, and we're achieving the vision and the mission of our district. So what does that look like? For the chief of schools, my executive coaching goes to network superintendents, and then that goes to our principal supervisors, where we have named them in our district as school support officers. That should be aligned coaching around particular student data points, whether it be instructional, whether it be management, whether it be around physical management, various things. Those principal supervisors then, their job is to coach principals. And they're coaching principals around observed and collected data points. And they're using a structured format for that. What is now charged is that the principal has to coach his or her assistant principals and academic coaches. And then from there, those people coach their teachers. There's a through line. And that through line is around a centralized data point. And so if we are focusing on, and here's an analogy, if we're focusing on third grade reading, I am looking at third grade reading for what it looks like as an entire district. My network superintendents are looking at it for what it looks like in their portfolio of schools. And then the school support officers are looking at, okay, so now I have 10 elementary schools. What does third grade reading look like for my 10 elementary? And then that third grade reading goes down to what it looks like in my grade levels as a principal and academic coaches. What does third grade reading look like for my caseload of teachers that I coach? Same data point, we look at it the same way. The actions that we create, we should see similar actions around how to respond to that data. How that response happens in different ways. Once it gets to the classroom, it's more about the practical things, the nuts and bolts, and that's what our academic coaches do. How to actually either model, analyze the data, come up with stronger lesson plans, practice those instructional routines, those pedagogical routines, or how to have solid classroom management strategies, et cetera. That sounds great, right? And you're like, hey, well, how do you do those things? We have to organize for impact. Now, one of the bold goals we have this year was everybody gets coached to be 1% better every day. That is a shift in practice. We had school leaders that said we only have certain teachers on coaching plans because they may be demonstrating a performance gap. But we know that our most successful people in society have someone that coached them. Some of our strongest executives have executive coaches, and some of our star athletes have coaches. It's the idea of wherever you are on the continuum is that we want everybody to get better wherever you are. But in order to do that, we had to create coaching loads. And so our principals looked at objective data points to say, how do I tier my teachers in my building? And so they tier those teachers in 3 different ways. Some teachers might get a coaching cycle and feedback every week. They may be a novice teacher. They may be a teacher that's struggling around classroom management. They may be a teacher around pedagogical routines that they need to strengthen up. And then there's the next tier where they may get coaching twice a month, every other week. And then we have teachers that could be very solid, and we say, hey, these are high-performing teachers, but they do get coached at least once a month because everybody has to have feedback. And sometimes it's those teachers who say, hey, I am often overlooked because I'm good, that nobody gives me feedback. And a lot of times, those are the teachers that we lose. We have to invest in our talent wherever they are on that continuum. So the coaching loads are designed to be manageable. Now, that is the rub that we have in our district, because given the number of teachers in the building versus the number of coaches, we got to make sure that we are allocating the appropriate number of staff and coaches to make sure that we have manageable coaching loads. And principals have done a fairly good job with using the resources that were presented to them to create these coaching loads. So kudos to them for really thinking about the third way, how they're using Title I funds to purchase academic coaches, things of that nature. But as you can imagine, we will want a baseline allocation of academic coaches across all schools so that we can make sure that we have balanced coaching loads and every teacher is really getting that type of support. And then after that, the next hard part is how to structure their daily tasks to balance coaching and instructional tasks. And that is direct coaching that happens from principal to academic coaches to say, hey, this is when you do your coaching cycles, this is when you sit into your planning sessions and give feedback. Those 2 last buckets are the most important. That is where the rubber really hits the road. And when we talk about academic coaches having done a lot of those administrative things, structuring that daily schedule, this is where we mitigate that and we give feedback around that. This is not perfect in every school, but where we see challenges, this is where we go back to that coaching process of school support officers, principal supervisors, making sure they give the right feedback to principals to make sure these bottom buckets, these last 2 buckets I just shared with you, are happening at a high level. It is going to take a while for us to get everybody up to speed at a high level, but I am really, really pleased at the progress that has taken place to date since rolling out this model. The foundational professional learning opportunities. So we just can't put people in these roles and come up with these new ideas without giving them the necessary feedback. And so first, thank you for your investment in the last budget and budget ask in improving some contracts. And this has allowed us to provide the professional development for our coaches. On the left-hand side of the screen, we have a partner, Relay Graduate School for Education, national framework that we have adopted, and they have provided great professional development for observation and feedback. And that actual framework is the same framework that happens from my office to the academic coach. There is no difference in how we roll that out. And then there's the principal supervisor coaching. And so we got to make sure that our principal supervisor are getting the necessary professional development so they can be effective or coaching principals. And then we have what we call instructional practice rounds. And very excited that Dr. Watts and Mr. Butler and Ms. Taylor, our deputy superintendent, they all sat in and engaged in our instructional practice rounds because then that shows not just their commitment, but their feedback is also aligned, and we all seeing things through the same lens. To date, we've had over 240 leaders to participate in our instructional rounds. And that is academic coaches, assistant principals, and principals across the district. And we just bring people together, and they go to a school that may not be theirs, and they practice how to observe great teaching, how to observe a middle-of-the-road teacher, how to observe a teacher that could be in some trouble, and what are the right action steps. And we norm on what's the right feedback to this teacher so that wherever you are, everybody's giving consistent feedback and seeing things the same way. On the right-hand side, it's still instructional coaching and management coaching. This is with our partner with CT3 Education, and this is where we're rolling out in our differentiated support schools, how we give real-time teacher feedback with targeted teachers and academic coaches, as well as we do on leadership coaching. Very similar process, no difference in their approach. Now we have all that. We know what our theory of action is. We got aligned systems. We provided the necessary professional development. So what happens on a day-to-day basis? What you see before you is a general coaching cycle that will happen. There is a goal that is established between the academic coach and the teacher. Like, we want to increase your own task behaviors in your classroom from 72% to 95%. They collect this data. They got to ensure that they are grounding their coaching in a particular data point, and then they actually engage in actual coaching through the coaching framework that I talked about, through observation and feedback, in which we call See It, Name It, Do It, or if it's in one of our CT3 schools, it's affirmation, impact, and challenge. From there, you got to say, hey, how well was the coaching? Did we get the desired results? We collect that post data. If you hit the mark, great. If you didn't hit the mark, great, because it sets the foundation for us to reflect on that and to establish, do we continue that action step or do we create a new action step so that that teacher and the students can achieve their goals? That is the coaching cycle. That is the cycle of continuous improvement. When coaches engage in this, there is no time for evaluation. There's no time for all the administrative things. They are spending time directly, knee to knee, with teachers, giving them their feedback. We built in a couple more things into our ecosystem of meetings because we want to make sure that things are more purposeful. So we created level-like meetings. And these meetings are led by our network superintendents and our school support officers. Those meetings are designed for our principals, assistant principals, and coaches to come together to analyze their data and their coaching loads, the information that came from their coaching loads. These administrative teams now take that information and say, how are we moving along the continuum towards our school improvement goals. How do we need to adjust our 45-day plans to make sure that we are meeting the mark? We wanted to carve this space out within our meeting ecosystem so that there's intentional conversations around the work that's happening day to day, and they have my team from the Office of School Leadership and Mr. Butler's team, the Office of Instructional Excellence. Everybody's in the same room, so if you need the support from various departments and within the division, those people are there to weigh in on the particular strategies and actions as to how they can support each school around achieving the goals in their school improvement plan as they revise those 45-day plans. And then we have our academic coach meetings. Academic coach meetings are led by our school support officer, Bell, and this is the opportunities for instructional coaches throughout the district to work directly with our academic coaches around any of the curriculum and pedagogical and planning things that we have rolled out, and so that the coaches are continuing to get this feedback so they're better prepared before they go in front of teachers. So we got to make sure we coach the academic coaches on the right things before they get in front of teachers. We don't want people to wing it. We want to make sure everybody's prepared before going back into the actual schoolhouse. Now, that is the process. That's what happens, need to need, the work every day. But we have to document and monitor this work. It's a lot of moving pieces. And so we want to document and monitor that. Historically, we have seen this happen via email. We've seen it happen in Google Drives. We've seen it happen in some form of Teams. But thank you for approving the contract for Level Data Grow and what our budget asks. And what that has done is that has allowed coaches to document their feedback to teachers. It has provided a level of accountability because it's transparent. And what happens is during our division meetings that I lead, I pull up sample action steps that coaches may have provided to teachers or principals have provided to coaches. And my team looks at those action steps and they spar to say, is this the right action step? It's transparency, it's accountability. And then when we don't see schools that are actively engaging in coaching cycles, we use the data from this platform to say, hey, we see a gap here. What can we do to help you to make sure you're coaching teachers more frequently on the right things? And lastly, I mean, it goes without saying, uniformity and consistency across all schools. It's a common language and a common approach. So by the numbers, these are the numbers that come right out of our Level Data Grow, our tracking system. Quick feedback, action steps. These are like touch points in which a coach would have engaged with a teacher. So if they gave them an action step for their development, how to do things better, or they gave them quick feedback on something that they've been working on, we set a goal for quick feedback to have 1,500 touch points for the year. Action steps, we set a goal for 1,500. And total just touch points, we just wanted 3,000. Because we knew that this was new learning. We didn't know how well it was going to get off the ground. But, you know, it's like when I was a kid and they removed me from the fried potatoes in the pan and introduced me to McDonald's fries, I got hooked. And our school leaders have gotten hooked. Within the first quarter, they beat our goal. If you look at the first and second quarter to date, they've already superseded the goal for quick feedback as well as action steps. Today, we have over 10,000 touch points, and our initial goal was 3,000. It became contagious, and that was intentional. It was intentional, and people saw the value of this. Again, it's not perfect. It's not perfect, but we're getting better. So what does it look like for our differentiated support schools? These are our schools that have multiple challenges, and you would think that all they want to do is put out forest fires. But by the numbers, they're telling you that they are interested and they are committed to giving the right feedback to make their schools better I'm going to highlight Groves High School. Over 416 quick feedback. That means they're giving feedback to adults about something, and 255 action steps. This is from our differentiated support schools. Many of these schools are leading the way in giving feedback to improve practices in their schools. Now, I could talk about this all day, but it's always good to hear from others. If you track the screen and give your attention, this was some principal highlights around the work that we're doing with Level Data Grow and feedback.
The quick feedback helps us to keep teaching and learning at the forefront of our focus. We know that day in and day out, teachers are looking to improve their craft and get better. We want to take all of our teachers from good to great. And so those action steps help us to continue to monitor our progress in that direction. And we hope that all of the teachers can get the very quick snippets and small bite-sized feedback pieces so that they can quickly monitor and improve their own instruction in real time.
Well, this approach gets us really engaged with what our teachers are doing in the classroom. And so we see multiple teachers, throughout the week, and we have a good sense of what's happening in the classroom in terms of instruction. And we're able to see and collaborate as an admin team to discuss, what improvements need to be made and provide feedback and coaching opportunities for our teachers.
By providing observation and feedback using the platform, we have been able to have a more organized way to get the feedback information to the teachers and follow up with them. And what we're finding is that before, very often we would give feedback to teachers, but the follow-up wasn't necessarily happening the way it needed to. And this is helping us to organize ourselves so that we're able to do a better job with the follow-up and ensure that the learning that is happening is translating to actions that are occurring in the classroom.
All right, I wish I could have prepped those leaders to say those things, but I didn't. All we did was ask the question, and Mr. Joe Wynn stood there with a cell phone and recorded. That's it. It was just a question asked. They weren't prepped to say any of those things. All right. So, in our differentiated support schools, we have real-time teacher coaching taking place. And this is a very structured way of coaching. And two things that we are going after as baselines to ensure that we create the right conditions. And that is increasing student engagement and making sure that students are participating on-task directions consistently. The far left graph, when we collect that baseline data, and you can see the actual rubric on the right, 50% of the students were disengaged in our baseline data. 22% were ritual compliance, meaning they were just doing it because you said do it, but they weren't engaged. And then 28% were on task. I'm doing it, but okay, not consistently the way I should be. Once these coaches shared the baseline data with teachers, gave them specific feedback, gave them a way of how to engage students, how to give precise directions, how to narrate what it is they wanted students to do. Now, those same students, 25% are disengaged, but we have now more active participation where they're actually doing the things that teachers ask them to do at least 85% of the time. And then in that transformative engagement, they're doing what teachers ask them to do 95% of the time or more. This data was collected just before the winter break. Our goal is to take that second bar graph you see and make it all that dark hunter green. But anything from that blue all the way to the dark green, we're on the right track. On the far right-hand side, percent on task. This is through 103 coaching cycles, 15 coaches, 55 teachers. This data was collected. Our baseline data when we first started this work, we had 50% of our students basically off task. Through a series of of coaching, now we have 22% of the students across these 55 teachers that have less than, that are off task. Again, our goal, anything in that green, we're on the right track. Anything on that blue, we're approaching the right track. What we've seen is a shift in practice. When adults do things different, kids do things differently. That's the takeaway from this graph. When adults show up differently and perform differently, so do students. Now, you heard it from me, but Paul Bamrick, he makes it very simple. He says, by receiving weekly observations and feedback, a teacher develops as much in 1 year as most teachers do in 20 years. Coaching has to be done consistently and regularly. The data that I showed you shows that it's consistently happening. What we're working on now is refining practice. We got the foundation now. We're refining practice. But the best people to hear this from, and the ones that we want to continue to invest in, is that I have Ms. Wanza Williams, the academic coach from Hurd Elementary, and Ms. Adanika, I hope I pronounced that correct, Smith Blackwell from Hodge Elementary. And they both represent two different perspectives of coaching. Ms. Williams from Hurd, if you'll come up. She's heavily engaged in the See It, Name It, Do It observation feedback approach. And then Ms. Blackwell Smith, she's heavily engaged in our real-time teacher coaching feedback that happens at Hodge Elementary School. And so they would give you 1 minute testimony. Again, they were not prepped. The only thing I asked them to do, and I asked them at the last minute, can you come and give us a 1 minute testimony as to what your experiences have been as an academic coach, and how has that translated to teacher development and student outcomes?
Good afternoon, and it was last minute, but I appreciate the opportunity to come in and to just share my experiences with the Grow by Level Data platform. So again, I am an academic coach at Hurd Elementary. So basically, my experience with it is that it does support academic achievement at Hurd, and we can tell based off of the growth that we've experienced on the middle of year MAP test. Also, it's a shared assessment. So it basically bridges the gap between everything we were already doing and people that we work with in the district. So for instance, I don't have access to the TEACS platform, so I can't see what the administration is doing and how they're supporting teachers. And I also don't have any access to any district platforms or anything like that. So it kind of just bridges that gap for us. So that way when we go into coach teachers, so the coaching cycle is designed to give teachers bite-sized action steps. Well, if different people are going in at different times because we all can't go in at the same time to observe teachers, we're giving them all different action steps because, of course, when you go in, you want to give them feedback, right? But when we have this platform, we can just go in. So if I go and observe a teacher, I can go back to see if someone else went before me, if the teacher already has an action step, and if I just need to just add to that, or do we need to add something else? So it just bridges that gap for us. And it also uses what we already are trained on as coaches. So we are trained on the Get Better by Faster Scope and Sequence, and then the See It, Name It, Do It strategy. So the program already embeds that for us. So for me, it's the bridging the gap for the things that all the different things we were using, and then just bringing it into one and using that data to support our student success. Thank you.
Ms. Williams, make sure that I don't forget you during Christmas. Ms. Blackwell Smith. Ms. Blackwell Smith, she is from Hodge Elementary, and she engages deeply in our real-time teacher coaching platform.
Good afternoon, everyone. As an academic coach, my job is grounded on building that solid partnership with teachers to, in essence, improve student outcome. The CT3 training has trained me to have that conversation with teachers to allow them to feel comfortable when we're talking about. So when I go in and I do the observation, it allows me to collect data on student engagement, collect data on how the teachers are performing. So when I meet with the teacher, it allows me to, first of all, build that relationship or consistently build that relationship. And in addition to that, talk with the teacher and give that data point. This percentage of your students were not engaged. Is there anything that we can do to improve that? Or what were your thoughts on this? And then it gives me an opportunity as the academic coach to model what this will look like. And with the relationship that we have built with the teachers, I am able to know when we go in to do that real-time coaching, I can interject. We use a walkie so I can give, we have codes that we use, so that helps to build the teacher capacity. It helps to build the teacher's confidence. So the teacher, and then when we do that, we meet back and then we go over. So it's like a cycle. So it's that continuous cycle of observation, modeling, them practicing, we come in to debrief and just building on different aspects of the teacher's practice. Building on student engagement, and we know that once students are engaged, that will improve the student performance because they are not just ritually compliant. They are compliant because they want to do it. So we have definitely seen an improvement in the student performance, and the teachers are very eager. So even during collaborative planning, I model some of these engagement strategies too. And the teachers, when you go in the classrooms, you see them making that concerted effort to do so. And the students are very receptive, and we see an improvement in their performance and in their, not just academically, but their behavior as well. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Smith. Blackwell, you too, please don't let me forget Christmas. But if I couldn't have said it any better. They are the executors of the work. I'm not out there coaching the teachers. We invest a lot into and depend on their skill set and their commitment. And so you heard directly from them what they are experiencing at the school level. So what is the impact? Our measures of academic progress is our universal screener. We set a goal that we wanted 50% of our students to be at or above grade level from beginning of the year to middle of the year, and 35% of those students demonstrating high growth. By the numbers, 80% of our elementary schools are at above grade level right now, where at least 50% of those kids are at the at above grade level, right? 40% of our schools have at least 35% of their students demonstrating high growth. Our middle schools, they have not yet met that threshold, but when we look at the data, they have moved now into that progressing threshold where at least 50% of our students are at that 40th percentile. And so they're closing gaps. They're closing gaps. They didn't meet the goal yet, but they will meet that goal. Our K-8s, you see that 89% have met that goal of at or above grade level, and in the high growth, it's 56% of them. Our high schools, and I wish I had a high school academic coach. They could not be here with us today, but 80% and 90%. That is phenomenal for our high schools, where we're seeing the change in practices. In our virtual school, we see that 100%, in our alternative school, 33%. Mathematics, you can see what those numbers are to the far right, and those percentages are even higher than our ELA percentages. We've made significant strides since the beginning of the year, but we can't rest there, so we have new goals. Our new goals is now we want 75% of our students in all of our schools to be at or above grade level, and then 65% demonstrating high growth. If we hit that 50% gives us a 1-year growth pattern. If we get to that 75%, I mean, that 65%, we're looking at maybe a 1.5 years growth trajectory for our students. And so that's what we're targeting. We have to move more students faster in a shorter period of time. And so that's why you see the demonstrating high growth goal there, because we have to move more students that may have some instructional gaps. So lessons learned. As I said, everything is not picture perfect. We have to continue to work on establishing the why and why instructional and leadership coaching is important. And part of that is a lot in my office, a lot with the leaders that report directly to me, and then what that messaging and narrative is as they get out to the classroom. We got to focus on the 5 C's. Continue to lead with clarity, give clear communications, collaborate, and that's what I'm most thankful for with our Office of Instructional Excellence, that collaboration that is happening between the 2 divisions, because this doesn't happen in isolation. The coaching, the things that happen from Mr. Butler's office, Ms. Burkett, and Mr. Childers, this doesn't happen just by happenstance. And then we have to continue to develop this culture of coaching, and so people don't see it as a punitive way, but it's a way of getting better, and we got to commit to it. We got to make a commitment from the top down and left to right. Continue to provide ongoing feedback, not one-shot, wonders. We got to continue to provide feedback on a regular cadence, and know that sometimes you got to go slow to grow, and you got to manage that process. But while we're going slow to grow, every glow that's happening, we got to celebrate it. We got to celebrate all our glows, and we got to embrace the grows. If we embrace the grows and engage in continuous improvement, we consistently get 1% better every day. Questions?
I am so proud of you, Ms. Hall. I see you over there writing away, and you held your questions.
Yep, I have my.
Oh, boy. But I'm still, you can't take the rest of the meeting, so go ahead.
Okay, and I'll be very quick. First of all, I have to say that I'm very disappointed. I'm disappointed that this level of workshop is just for these 5 board members. This needs to be when the whole board is present. It's not fair to them that the 5 of us have this information and they don't. And if we're going to be the powerhouse behind the superintendent, all of us have to have consistent information that we're working with. And you can't do it when you have 5. So to me, that's my only complaint, that this was at an academic excellence meeting and not at an informal where all the board got to hear this. This was worth 10 GSBA courses as far as I'm concerned. So that's my complaint. On the other side, how wonderful this was. It's assuring, and it makes me optimistic that we really are turning the corner on this whole literacy dilemma. And the words, the vocabulary I was listening for was modeling. Are these academic coaches going in and just talking at teachers, or are they showing them? This is how it should look. That was the first thing. The second thing I was wondering, okay, this sounds like it'd be great for you go in a classroom that the kids are all ready to learn and happy and, have their instruments and ready. What about the kids who are half asleep and all of that? And you covered that's being monitored, how to get those kids up. And the last thing I'm going to say is I worry that the children in our alternative schools are not getting this, that the teachers are not getting this, and it's not fair for us to say, okay, we're going to punish you for your poor behavior and send you to an alternative school, and it's like you don't exist. And it's not fair, and we've got to. They don't have a board member. I'll be happy to be board member for the alternative schools, but we've got to do something, because all those kids we can move up from the bottom, that's going to get us to the top even quicker if we can move them up. So that's all I have to say, and thank you.
Do you want to respond about the alternative schools?
Yes, ma'am. So actually, we're revamping and refining some approaches in our alternative setting. Some things will come earlier than others. And as we go through the renovation process, you will see a big change in our approach of how we approach alternative learning and how that can be a viable option to get kids back on track, or even the kids that were on track, to keep them on track and rehabilitate them to get back into their regular school settings. If we do it right, many students may not even want to go back to their regular school settings, but we are in the process of revamping our alternative education.
So this is the greatest ever. I think this is brilliant, and I love this. I have a few questions just to clarify, because it was a lot of information that I'm impressed you just fit into that amount of time, especially for the amount of work that clearly has gone into this. So I appreciate it as someone who wanted this, and we paid for this, and you have done amazing things. Okay, so questions. I had to consolidate mine like Miss Connie. So do we have a standard by which we're measuring the success of this? I know one of our teachers said they looked at the middle of year MAP scores. Are we using, since we've made everything in one database, one data set, do we have one data set we're then measuring student success goals with?
Yeah, so it's a triangulated data approach. And what has been powerful in this work is the work that has come out of Ms. Taylor's shop, and they just released some new reports in our data dashboard. We are triangulating what GMAS DRC Beacon, which is our benchmark scores, benchmark assessment, to that of our MAP. MAP is a universal screener that gives us some insight of the health of our core. DRC Beacon allows us to assess standards, right? So that point that we're looking at is that we look at a triangulation, and then we look at projection towards how many students are within, on track to be proficient, they're progressing towards being proficient, or for high growth. So it's not like a one solid data point for all of them. Now for MAP, it is very clear that 50th percentile and then that 65th percentile for high growth. But we want to triangulate that data because MAP assesses a lot of skills. And so it's not just skills that are aligned to our scope and sequence. So we got to make sure that even though we have those data points, we analyze the data to say what has been taught, how well are kids doing on things that have been taught to date, what we need to remediate, and what is it that kids are ready to learn. So it's more about, and I'm glad you brought that up, we have a standard data analysis process that we use across all schools that was adapted from our Atlas protocol. So we look at now data the same way and triangulate that data the same way, so then you know exactly what we need to be targeting.
Awesome. It sounds like you've really thought this through, and it's even more complex than just one score, because I know we each have our own feelings about using one score versus another and kids getting over-tested, and I appreciate that. One other, okay, so I think it was slides 7 and 8 maybe, but when you're talking about tiering teachers, are we re-tiering them based on updated data we're getting, and then how often is that happening?
Yeah, so we how to build that muscle. So yes, some schools do re-tier. I can't speak to every school because, again, we're still on a journey. And so that's part of that refinement approach. But the theory behind that is we re-tier teachers. Schools that are doing it well, they do re-tier teachers. And then others, they are to that point where they're ready to start and looking at those data points. So we're at that place in the school year where we're going to go into our benchmark testing. We just finished our last round of middle year MAP testing. And this is the right time to start tiering teachers to say, hey, what revisions do we need to make in the tiering structure? Also, this is when I meet with the division this Friday with our principal supervisors, we'll be talking about how we're tiering principals and re-tiering principals based off middle of the year data. So that is part of the normal cycle of continuous improvement.
That is awesome. And then, okay, last question, and then I have a quick comment, and then I'm done. So do we have any additional supports planned for, like, looking at the middle school data specifically? And I know you said you're looking at the progressing data. Do we have a plan for what we're going to do to help them get on track if they're still lagging a little?
Yes, ma'am. So I think you really let the cat out of the bag a little early, but part of our transformation strategy, many of those middle schools fall in that transformation strategy and how we would do some things a little differently to support middle school. As you know, middle school is that time of the year where we got to understand the developmental readiness of kids when they enter in 6th grade all the way to 8th grade. So we got to make sure we are prepping teachers to really engage on the best pedagogical approach for teaching middle school students, right? And then having the right leaders that can really bring the best out of those teachers to make that happen. We also know that in middle school, student engagement has to look differently, right? How we engage them in instruction has to look different. And so we got to make sure we're building that capacity in teachers to understand that, everything is not just so controlled. We got to understand how adolescents think. And so that's part of that work. We can throw all kinds of strategies out there, but we have to understand the development of a middle schooler and what's the best approach of teaching middle school students. But to answer your question, so we actually have assigned more supports to those schools. Some schools, we have done some above allotments around the ESOL population, SPED population. Additionally, we have invested in deeper interventions around the REP classrooms to ramp up our literacy for middle grade students. So those are some of the technical things, but there are also some other tactical things that we got to focus on as well.
I like this because I think it's a way to give better tiered support, which was the goal in some of these schools struggling, where you're kind of taking a temperature on what their struggles are. You're not assigning a struggle.
Right.
And then just throwing whatever strategy typically works at it. You're saying, well, we tried this, it didn't work, it works here, but not there. And then you refocus. So not having an answer is good because it means you're still looking for maybe what the underlying struggle is. So along with that, my quick statement, and not to get ahead of Ignite because I'm very excited about Ignite, but is that one thing I continue to worry about just a little bit, this almost makes all worries disappear, is that if we keep advancing kids, now that we have an intervention strategy to help kids who are not reading at grade level, I do worry that as we provide excellence in instruction and even try to push that even further, better and better, in instruction, if kids still aren't reading at grade level, but they've been promoted, I worry that we're tying teachers' hands while also holding them accountable for all this coaching that they're receiving. And so I just want to throw that out there and, is something that I hope we're addressing too, now that we have a way to advance literacy prior to letting them leave the grade level and move along.
Yeah, that is a real struggle, and so we can't just sweep that under the rug, which is why we had the REP classes in place, where we can help students that are really struggling, at least 2 years behind in reading. But additionally, we just finished a meeting and with another vendor to offer high dosage tutoring at the secondary level for middle grades and possibly 9th grade. What we're working on is making sure principals are able to fit that in their schedule. So when these things come middle of the year, we got to make sure we're able to operationalize it so we can get the best impact, right? We have a follow-up meeting, and it's very, very possible. We're still within that window where we can offer a round of high dosage tutoring to try to achieve at least 1 year of growth between now and the time that students take the GMAS assessment. However, it is going to be very important as we move into the next school year that we put these things in place. So there could potentially be a budget ask for these things coming up in this budget season, so that we can have these things in place on day one. Principals can plan for this around their master schedule, assign appropriate staff. We can work through our staffing models so that we are allocating resources to the need of that specific school. So that helps close that gap. If we don't think that way, then we can't move more students faster in a shorter period of time. Our focus has to be focused around how do we get more kids to move quicker in a shorter period of time.
I just want to underscore, because many people think oh, you have high dosage tutoring, go flick the light switch, it's on, it's happening. It takes time to operationalize these things. And so while there might be resources to do it in every school, I'm not gonna do it in every school because I know we can't implement it well in every school. So we're gonna have to tier implementation, tier support, so that we do things well. Most ideas are good ideas, they just fall short when implementation is not considered. So I just want to continue to bring that up to board, the board. Your role is to govern and to provide a budget, but that's just one small step in much larger work that has to be done. And we work with people. And the humanity of this work also complicates things.
Dr. Howard?
I know we're scheduled to leave at 3:30, and there are two other things, but I'd like to say, I realize that there's a lot of work that's been done. A significant amount of work has been done regarding the district coaching. When I look at the aligning for impact, I envision one more box. Had the opportunity to talk to a first grade teacher, and I said, if you could get anything, if we could give you just one thing, what would it be? She didn't say more books, she didn't say more computer software, she didn't say additional professional development, she didn't say more coaching, she said a full-time para. Mm-hmm. I myself was a first grade teacher with a full-time para. Mm-hmm. So wouldn't it be wonderful if we had an additional box behind teachers to have more paras? So whereas that teacher now can become a coach to the para, because paras are really, they could really be used as assistant teachers, preparing them to one day become a teacher. Another point I'd like to make is the meetings. There was a significant discrepancy with the number of meetings that those schools were having. The number went from 40 to 0. So can you talk a little about the importance of the meetings? Should meetings be included as a part of that rubric as far as the feedback? What slide was that?
Can you help me with the slide?
14.
Oh, yeah, so, no, so those meetings, what you see there, and let me break this graph down for you. So what we were focusing on this year was the actual action steps and quick feedback. Like, those are the two metrics that we were tracking. The things that principals took liberties in doing was using the platform to document their meetings. So that column that you see there, that is a column where they just use the platform to put their agenda, capture their notes, so it's transparent. So it's not a scenario of additional work. This is just how they capture the work that they're doing. So they're using it as a repository. So at Beach High School, Mr. McCall, he was leading the way in this. He was like, it's so many meetings happening in my school. As a principal, I want to be able to know what's being said in the meetings, who's attending the agenda. So he has his school to input their meeting and their notes in the platform so he can monitor it that way. So that's what that is.
Because if it's effective, the middle schools may need to take consideration because their numbers are really low.
Yeah.
0, 1, and 2.
Yep.
And we see that the goals that, and there's a lot of work to be done, because if our goals is 22%, the goals are 22% reading on or above grade level, and right now it's at 11%. Mm-hmm. That's really that's a red flag, because it'll soon be time for GMAS.
That's correct.
So we really that's a low percentage.
Yep. Yeah, so.
And even with the low percentage, they're meeting 50% of the low with that percentage. So maybe the next presentation can help us with middle school. And finally, the feedback data, is any of that data being used to assist principals with TEKS?
Yeah, so any data that's collected, principals can use that data to make a determination on how they evaluate their staff. So, ideally, feedback data should be used to make employees better. And then when they evaluate, they can say, hey, they responded well to the feedback, they're making gains, they're at a proficient level. Or it could be there's a will issue, they don't want to respond to the feedback, or they're not developing. maybe they're level 1 or 2, then they determine, now we're going to move more towards a growth plan. So, yeah, principals use this data to inform how they will write the evaluation of teachers.
The 11% that met the goal and 11% of the 22% that didn't, did you all hone in into the data to determine whether or not those students were ever retained?
Which 11%?
That'd be good information. But middle school, with the goal was 22% to read on or above grade level, but right now it's 11% of those students that actually are reading on or above grade level. So my question is, the percentage that's really struggling, it'll be interesting to know whether or not they were ever retained.
Oh, yeah, I don't know. I didn't look at it that way.
Kind of just dig deep and find out what's going on with those middle school scores.
I think, Dr. Hall, that this number is 22% are meeting the goal of 50% of students at or above grade level. So I don't think it's 22% of the students. It's 22%, the way that I read it. Is that correct? So 22% of the schools
22%
are
of the
meeting the
schools.
goal of 50 students at or above.
That's correct.
Grade level.
So basically, two
So you don't
schools.
Could
actually
mean
see the
even
number
lower.
of students. Yeah,
It could
it's a
mean
little,
even it's worse.
yeah.
It
so
could be worse.
It could,
Yeah,
'cause it's-
really, what
it's-
so Dr. Hall,
Go to the next slide.
no,
Yeah.
you lift a great point, and it does require further investigation, because you have to get to the root cause around those situations. And I do concur that a para in the classroom does help teachers, not just in a K2 realm, but all the way to K5, right? It helps with small group instruction. It helps with all those things. So, I mean, potentially that, if that is a budget ask, I can assume that then there's a commitment that's going to support us on that ask. And even if we increase the allocation, we got to make sure we fill those positions to make sure that those positions are making an impact on the classroom.
Mr. Moss?
I had a few things to say, but I'm going to narrow it down to one. The first thing that by the way, this is amazing. This is absolutely amazing. I love that we're setting high goals. I love that we're dreaming bigger. I just love that. But the most important thing that I saw on this is demonstrate belief in student potential. That every student in Chatham County, I don't care where they live, I don't care their zip code, I don't care anything else, but every student in Chatham County has that potential. I love that. Thank you.
Ms. Hall, I know you had I'll give you 30 seconds.
Here we go.
To Ms. Campbell's point about
Use your
retention.
mic.
About retention, and I've said this before, and I'll continue to say it. Retention on its own just gives a child 9 months more time. That's all. Just if that's all you do, okay, retention. So you have a chance to mature. Let's give it that. But if you're going to retain a child, then you have to say, what are we going to do differently that's going to make a difference? Because all of this that you've done, if that child is still not able to be promoted, is not ready to be promoted, then what's going on with that kid? Is an IEP, is it time to look at a referral to an IEP? Is there something really, that we're expecting of that child that they don't have the capacity to give? But if they have the capacity and they still have not achieved after all of this, then what are we going to do differently? And that, once you decide that, then if the child is held back, then we monitor, and maybe by January, the child is ready to go on. But just this, you're not ready, so you're going to be held back, it's not going to work anymore, because it's not equitable to the students who it happens to. And the other thing is, I've been asking for Paris since 2018. So, Dr. Watts, I guess at the finance meeting, one of us is going to have to say, we want, as a board, want paras in every pre-K, well, we already have pre-K in 1, that's given. In every second and.
We don't have them.
No, they're shared.
Oh, every
So they
one-
have a allocation of paras, and they're shared across grade levels. So Every single teacher is not assigned someone that is with them all day, every day.
Okay, so Kurt will help us get the language right so that we can,
So I listen. I hope you all know that I listen. And
Okay.
also, it is a vision for mine because as Dr. Howard Hall mentioned, it supports student achievement, but it also supports a talent strategy and that it creates a pipeline. So it will be highly likely that you will see it, especially in our differentiated schools. Like I have to start somewhere. And depending on the budget implication for that and some of the other things that we may want to bring to you all. As a reminder to the board, though, we can do anything you all want to do, but it's about choices and trade-offs because the resources are not endless. There's a finite sort of resources, so we have to decide where do we want to invest and where do we need to uninvest or sunset so that we can reallocate resources towards those things. So push the ideas out there, but also say what might we need to take off the table so that we can create the funding source for the things that we feel like could better move the dial. Does that make sense? Because it's still just a fixed amount of finances that we get.
Yeah, we've gone through this, Ms. Hall, before, and great suggestion, and through the process of the budget. We're trying to recollect, I mean, just looking at elementary alone in classrooms, you could get upwards of 79 additional positions added to do the fuller scope of it, more. And I remember a few years ago when we went through that drill, it was a couple $1 million on the impact to the budget. So it's good that we're looking at it now, so early in the game as we get ready and plan in our budget process. But when you talk about trade-offs, 100%, it always comes down to that. We're watching very closely. If you listen to what the governor said in his recent State of the Union, he's talking about $2,000 supplements for state employees. And we all know what that means. When you have a supplement of that dollar figure, we're seeing it as a one-time impact to a budget, but you're going to have a major budget consideration because we've always operated in the mode of you can't just do it for one employee group, you got to do it for all. So a lot to consider on that, but I think hearing this early now is the great way to move into this, but knowing that there's going to be a price tag to it.
We also have to consider, can we fill vacancies? So if you add 80 positions, but you only fill 40. So again, taking all the things into consideration so that when we make the budget ask, we can operationalize it. A couple of years ago, we asked for a lot of counselors, and those vacancies sat and sat and sat.
yeah. Well, the fact that you're saying you will look at specific schools to start,
Yes.
the schools most likely to
Need is the most, yes.
Then that's some place to start, and that's also a pilot for us to see. Okay.
Now, I would be remiss if I didn't put a plug in for principals. If you ask me what principals are asking for, they will tell you they want coaches.
Well, and this is where I think it's a bigger picture
Every meeting.
conversation. We need to understand as a board what the strategies are. Like, I hear you absolutely on paras, and you're saying principals are asking. So we need to
Every
understand
meeting.
all the strategies and understand the pros and cons of each of the, as we look at the whole picture of the budget.
Denise, I'd like to hear from them. I'd like the principals to come and tell us, this is why we want coaches more than paras. Let us know, tell us, because from my mind, one of the biggest problems is classroom management, and paras tend to help that very much, get those kids ready to be engaged. So if you see that coaches are even more helpful than paras, come, bring them in. Let us hear what they have to say.
I think that's what this is, right? We're hearing about the benefits of coaching, and we're seeing the results. So, maybe we have additional information about paras, and it just needs to be part of a bigger picture conversation. And I'm not against paras at all. I'm just saying that we need to understand what all the strategies are. And in closing this chapter real quickly, Dr. Barnes, I want to thank you and your team. I know that this is very much a team effort that has gone into this. I absolutely love loved, when you started this, you said culture of coaching, not evaluation. And that, to me, really resonated as just kind of a mental shift, and I hope that our teachers are receiving it in that way as well, because I can see, particularly if it's a teacher that's not normally coached, I could see where they might be like, oh, wait a minute, what are you doing, you know? And that we're looking at a system of schools and not a school system, so that we understand how our schools are complementing one another, and that as we do have students that move from school to school, that we have that consistency and that excellence across the district. I may follow up with you some additional questions. I do want to point out, Ms. Hall, you mentioned literacy, but I hope you saw those math results. The math results were fantastic and even above the literacy ones. And then finally, really curious to hear more about the revamping of the alternative schools when that comes forward. And I'd put a plug in for revamping our entire middle school way of thinking, as well as kind of our, you know, maybe we put that in the strategic plan, but we know the challenges of middle school and the opportunities that we have there. Okay, so we are supposed to adjourn at 3:30. We did start a little bit late. Are we okay going until about 3:40? If anyone needs to leave early, please do. I don't know that we're going to get to the literacy policy and Ignite, and I know we have a lot of people excited for Ignite. If we do not get to the literacy policy today, is that something that we can pick up either at the next AEC meeting or at an informal or somewhere like that? Kurt's laughing, so I think he
Let's
was
just see how far we
guessing
can
this
go.
question.
Let's aspire.
Let's
do
aspire to keep
both,
going.
'cause
Okay.
we kind of need to move on both.
Okay, all right, let's go.
All right, so Ignite Reading, and again, this is a partnership between the two divisions, and actually three divisions on this initiative between Strategy Management, Office of Instructional Excellence, and School Leadership. You have heard a lot about Ignite Reading, so I won't spend a lot of time on the explanation of it, but I will hit the big parts. So we know that the delivery model for Ignite Reading is making sure that we have high-quality instructional materials, and that we're giving tutoring daily during the school day, right, with a consistent tutor, which is very impactful. And then the people, the quality of people that we put in front of kids is what's most important. Those that are tutoring have over 100 hours of professional learning to be able to support students. And then we take that data and how we integrate that within the overall ecosystem of our data analysis platform. Right now, we have 4 schools that are piloting Ignite for the differentiated support schools, and that's Butler, Haven, Hodge, and Gaston. We have 100 students that are in the initiative as of today. Now, we have other students that could benefit from this, but we piloted 100 seats for this year, which are 2nd and 3rd graders. So what are we learning on the front end at this point? That students who are engaged in Ignite high-dosage tutoring, they're making more growth in our ARM percentile, and this is how we measuring.
ARM, what's ARM?
Yep.
What's ARM?
Yep. So I'm gonna bring up Ms. Burkett. We will prepare for that question, and so she's gonna give an overview of what the ARM score is and how we use that to measure student progress in our reading rope.
ARM score interpretation. So the ARM score is what we call the norm reference score for AMERA. So what that does, we've looked at words correct per minute for fluency rates and phonological awareness, comprehension scores. And what the ARM score does is take all of the components of the reading rope and put it into more of a composite score that tells us the whole number is roughly the grade level performance, and the decimal represents roughly the month of that grade level. Does that make sense?
We had this discussion at, I remember this, and it's confusing.
It was. Can I provide any other clarification?
Maybe an example once we get to
Okay.
the data.
All right, sounds good.
And then we also recognize that students who are lower performing readers that were involved in Ignite tutoring, they moved at a higher percentile than those students who did not. So our most challenged learners below that 25th percentile, so greater gains. What you see here is what Ms. Burkett was referencing in terms of the ARM score. So at the beginning of the year, there's a norm reference score where we see students. Then there's a projection as to where the student may be, in this case, July 26th. What you see are those little white boxes, right? If we want to go mathematically, the line of best fit. This is that trend line where we see students falling. And ideally, we want to see students above that blue line, right? This is where we want to see students, either on or above the blue line. As you can see, at the very beginning of the year, we have several students below the blue line, right? As they're progressing, as you see the months change, you're seeing how they're now getting to and above the blue line. If we maintain the right trajectory, by the time we get to 2026, we will have students that are performing at or above grade level and may not need this additional support if they didn't engage in high dosage tutoring moving into the next year, because we would have closed a deficiency gap in those phonological or foundational skills, reading skills. All right. So here, what you're seeing is a comparison. So there were 7 weeks. At the time this data was pulled, this data is based off 7 weeks of students having been engaged in Ignite high dosage tutoring. And when we compare them against the comparison group, you'll see that students in the blue pretty much double the gains in their ARM, which is that percentile rank and that norm reference score. They actually double their growth than in comparison to those who were not in Ignite reading, right? Now, and that is in the same school. If we compare that, and that's across the district. If you look at the third graph for the students at the treatment schools, they still outperform their peers in their own school as a result of being in Ignite reading. So that is a clear indication that kids being poured out for this initiative are performing better than the same child that could be sitting there with them in their same class, same teachers, but this intervention is making a difference, because that's the only thing that changed, was being in high dosage tutoring. Teachers the same, classroom the same, instructional lessons the same, but we have noticed that kids, those 100 kids, have outperformed their peers in their own school as well as kids across the district in the same grade level. All right, this goes back to what Ms. Burkett was referencing, and so I'm gonna bring Ms. Burkett out. She can break that algorithm down to you even better.
Okay, so when we're talking about an ARM score, regardless of grade level, a whole number 1.0 change is roughly a grade level. So if you go from 1.0 to 2.0, you've moved roughly a grade level. So what we're looking at here is students who received the Ignite tutoring moved 0.83 of a grade level. So that represents roughly 8 months of an accelerated reading growth over that 7-week period of time, compared to those students who were not receiving Ignite, accelerating at approximately 4.5 months of reading growth. So could be looking at a student moving well beyond the 25th percentile, closing that gap, getting closer to the 50th percentile, being on grade level, and that equates to potential changes and being, at risk for significant reading difficulties and things of that nature. So that is significant in terms of that short 7-week period of time, growing that 0.8 ARM score.
Just for clarification, this says estimated ARM, so it's...
So what we're looking at, so similar to a projected proficiency on GMAS, we're able, so on the previous graph that showed the trend line with all the triangles and everything, that's an example of one student. So every time they read with Amira, that's what those individual triangles represent. We get an updated, based on that progress, what that estimated projected ARM score could be at the end of the year. Okay.
So is this estimated, so is this estimated ARM for the end of the year?
That would be for the end of the year.
Okay.
So if we go back to the other graph, that's the actual change in their ARM. That's not projected, that's their actual.
Okay, the top says estimated. The title says estimated.
I'm sorry, Shraddha pulled this, so I want to make sure.
Sorry, I just want to
Nope,
make sure.
that's
we're
okay.
clear.
Yeah, we pulled this in November. So this is the estimated ARM, right? Because they had not taken their middle of year benchmark yet.
Right.
So what I prefer to do is compare beginning of year to middle of year benchmark.
Sure.
We didn't have that data yet.
Okay.
So at that time, we were looking at how much, what is the projected growth they're going to make, so estimated ARM as of November. So within 7 weeks, a typical kid would be making roughly 4 months of growth, right? And then, but the students with Ignite were making projected to make roughly 8 months of growth.
Okay, so this is not actual, it's
I
estimated.
apologize, that was
Okay,
my
that's
mistake.
okay. Thanks for clarifying.
Sorry.
Is it a burning question? I just wanted to clarify. Is it? Let's keep, can we keep going? Yeah. Okay, let's keep going. Sorry.
All right, so of the 100 students, we had 17 that did not show measurable growth, and we're talking about students that's below the 25th percentile. But if you look at the bar graphs in the middle to the far right, we had 15 that show some growth in comparison to those that were not receiving the dosage of high dosage tutoring. And then that far right bar graph shows that 66% of the students, that's the blue graph, that showed strong growth as a result of being engaged with Ignite, whereas 34 students, when compared, did not. Does that make sense? Good. Good. So what we know is several factors that factor into this, but students that engage with Ignite show more growth in changing their ARM percentile faster. The only thing that has changed, as I said, was the actual dosage or high dosage tutoring. But we know that there could be some other factors like how well they engage in coaching, et cetera. But this is what we attribute these students' growth to. And then students that's at the lower percentile actually grow faster. So, once you get something structured in front of kids, you see that bump, right? And so in that lower percentile, less than the 25th percentile, we see quicker gains. Now the challenge can be is like once they get over that 25th percentile, we have to continue to push them. But what it has shown us is that students who receive Ignite tutoring, and once they reach the first grade reading level of proficiency, they tend to remain on benchmark without having high dosage tutoring moving in the future. So while we focused on second and third grade for this pilot and for this test, our goal is to engage on the first grade promise to say, let's intervene before they get to the second and third grade, get them on grade level by the first grade, kindergarten, first grade, so that once they get to the second and third grade, they no longer need this intervention. And therefore, going back to the earlier conversation, we don't have those promotion concerns and things of that nature that would have arisen. So we do have a first grade promise there. And so looking forward to expanding this initiative to include seats for kindergarten and first grade in the spring of 2026, which that means we will have to engage in an additional contract to expand seats, but based off what we've seen happen with second and third grade, this is the right move in the spring versus waiting to the end of the year to try to do this at the beginning of the next year. And then also in the summertime, provide opportunities for students throughout the summer so we can reduce summer learning slide and students don't regress. Ultimately, in the fall, we would like to expand this to more schools to have a greater impact. But right now in the pilot schools, we're seeing things are promising, and we want to go ahead on the dial back even further, focus on the kindergarten and first grade students in the spring, so that when we start next year, we have more kids starting the year off at closer or at grade level, and we have less work to do with those students in terms of catch up, and we can begin to really see them thrive and learning to read, and well, actually reading to learn next year versus learning to read. Questions?
Ms. Hall?
If I'm doing my Ignite lesson, what are Stephanie and Tanya and Denise and Roger doing while I'm over here at Ignite. And before you say, what I hope is not happening is that they're out having a science nature class. They're doing, so that I'm losing out on some wonderful experience while I'm doing it night. So,
So that happens during our dig block. Every student is engaged in interventions. And what you also will see is when you spoke about the powerful use of a para, it could be a para that is partnered with them to be the adult in the classroom while they're engaged in their tutoring. But all students during that dig block is engaged in some level of intervention. So they're not pulled out of their core instruction for this. This happens at a time where everybody receives intervention.
Or enrichment.
now, how does that
enrichment,
look? How does everybody get intervention? That's beyond my
Intervention or
experience.
enrichment. So they go to different places. We
Yeah.
have.
Oh, I see.
The para can pull a small group.
Okay.
The teacher can have a small group. We also have, I forget the name of the teachers that.
The EIP
IPs,
teacher
They
like I
can pull a
was.
small group. The English as second language teacher
Oh,
could be
yeah.
coming in. The special ed teacher
Okay.
could be coming in to pull. So the academically gifted and talented teacher could be pulling
Okay.
a small group. So that's how they're all getting.
So no way is this a punishment. This is wonderful and everybody else is doing it and then we go, that's good. Thank you.
Ideally, you want to look at it as, if we look at a standard treatment protocol for students that are not on grade level, this is the identified students' standard treatment protocol.
Any other questions? Okay, Ms. Campbell, I see the look.
Super fast. So I think this is the greatest thing that we can do for students. And let me just put on the record, because, I like to make sure we're good stewards of our money. I do think that if it means we take from somewhere else, this is the one thing that will change everything for students. And to my point earlier about, retention with intervention, this would fix that for us, as you stated, and I agree with you. I think that we would not have to worry about kids potentially now in 7th grade who are reading at a low elementary school reading level, that we're now giving these teachers excellent coaching, and then they're excellently instructing, but they're instructing children who can't read or write. And so I think that this is the way. I think the first grade promise is great. Where do I sign? And how do we make this a thing where we can do this to as many schools as possible, equitably? Like, even if you're not in a school that's struggling, I think this is something we should offer and we should prioritize this. So I'm here for it. Thank you.
And I would concur. It's fantastic and clearly is showing results. Not to be answered now, but I still want to know, I don't want to leave the other kids, we're going to first and second, which is great. We're addressing, it's an upstream solution, which is great, but what are we doing about the fish that are in the stream now? And how do we address those older kids and the ones that have gotten past that? And then just quickly, Dr. Watts opened this meeting linking it back to finance. I'm going to link it back to CIC yesterday. You were just talking about, we pull out these groups, and that's another thing I want us to be thinking about in our school design. Some schools have really, really wide hallways, and they pull groups out in the hallways, and it works fantastically. And other schools have very narrow hallways. They can't do that. So let's be thinking about how our building design reflects what we need to be doing in our classrooms. So, okay, let's move on to academic literacy policy.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Thank you, Committee Chair, members of the Academic Excellence Committee. As you can see by the robust discussion that we just had, there are many components of statutory requirements for the work that we're doing, especially when it comes to literacy. We did have a recommendation and a request from one of your colleagues, your fellow board member, Dr. Howard Hall, sent us some information that we took under deep consideration in the discussion point of the board adopting an official stance on literacy and through the policy that the board has oversight over. I did want to remind the committee as we go through this process that the discussion that you just had is a good way to understand and embody the work that we're doing around literacy. There are many threads through there that you could see and feel and understand what's happening in our classrooms, which is baked into our strategic priorities. Of course, the strategic plan of the school district is that roadmap that really drives the work of the school district, the priorities of a school district that feed into all other functional areas. We talk about CIC meetings, you talk about finance committee meetings as well. Well, it's all driven by our strategic plan. Strategic priority 1 is the primary driver. I did want to lift up for just general understanding, as we all know, and for the public at large, under your strategic priority 1 objective, the first objective B under strategic priority 1, objective B, you'll see to advance proficiency in literacy and numeracy, specifically called out. These areas also include areas of key performance indicators and strategies that are driven and clearly focused on advancing literacy and the proficiency of our students in this area. So as you think about policy, you have to think first too about, well, what are we already doing? And how can we ensure that if we're going to write policy, that it supports and helps and does not hinder the work of the school district to remain nimble, flexible, and be able to provide the very best for our students every single day. We do know that things can happen under the Gold Dome that can change the way we do things every single year. We don't know what will come as a result of this year's legislative session, but we're watching that very closely. The board does have policy on setting policy. So we did want to call that out, just as a bit of a level setting here. We all understand, and through your policy BD, policy development, it clearly states that the governing body establishes policies to be implemented. And it is kind of unique as you walk through this walk and you think about just the levels as it tiers down. The policies, as we know, are what the board sets, and the administration then executes and operationalizes those policies. Well, if you take it a step higher, state laws, federal laws, and the laws and statutory requirements and things that come down, that really sets the floor for establishing those policies that we then further operationalize in our administrative regulations. Of course, the procedure for our policies and adopting them, we all know there's a first read and a second reader. That's why today is so important for us, because we did want to invite some discussion of the board through this committee before we were to develop something in official writing that would land at the Horseshoe at a regular called meeting for a first reader. So today I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that we're not at that level yet. This is the beginning stages of this, and we thought it was really a quality recommendation, actually, of the board officers that we have some discussion in Academic Excellence Committee on this very topic. So you do have in front of you on your screen a couple of key points. These were actually summary points of language that was provided by Dr. Howard Hall in the process as we go through reviewing the development of a literacy policy. Of course, it's clear that we have the guide rails that are set, and this is important when we talk about this, which is the statutory requirements. Had a lot of discussion this morning with some of our staff about the history of this law going back to 2023 with HB 538. Prior to that, though, you all remember SB 48, which was Georgia's dyslexia law. Just last year in the legislative session, it was HB 307 that combined those two legislative components into the Georgia Early Literacy and Dyslexia Act, which is HB 307, which is what we're currently operating on. So we understand that there is statutory language that currently governs the work that we do in this area. We want to make sure that any policy that we were to write, A, is in alignment with that, but B, really bolsters the work that we're doing, but is also not so stringent that it wouldn't survive a change or revision that could be forthcoming from the Gold Dome. The second bullet point is language that Dr. Howard Hall actually had put into her request, and it really is, I think, the beginning nugget, if you will, of where this policy could land. You see just some good 20,000-foot level language that talks about implementation of robust evidence-based instructional practices, We talk about resources here. This is that crossover. You talk about the Finance Committee. The one I love is cultivating a culture of reading and writing excellence. So when you talk about a 20,000-foot level policy statement, that really captures quite a lot. So that's there as a beginning point as we talk about this. And then further, we talked about to ensure the full compliance of HB 307 and seamlessly integrating and strengthening our established district literacy plan. So that's an important component because the district does have a literacy plan. Some quality policy language the board could consider if the committee agrees that this makes good sense going forward is authorizing the superintendent, requiring the superintendent to ensure that this district does in fact have a literacy plan, because currently in policy that is not written. It is a matter of practice in ensuring that we have one, but is not a requirement of policy. So that is something that the board could consider as well in going through this exercise. Wanted to really highlight again in what we currently are operating from HB 307. Again, it was combined for the Dyslexia Act, and it also did a few things. It did clean up a few components when it was signed into law, like deleting certain delivery models under early intervention services that would not be allowed. That's in there. That was clarified in the law. And it went further on to clarify the definition of high-quality instructional materials, for example. But the spirit of that law still remains, and that's the implementation of universal screening protocols, tiered intervention systems, the adoption of high-quality instructional materials. We all know that. Those are those that are grounded in the science of reading and ongoing professional development for educators. So this really stands to the point where we talk about, well, where do you start? The first thing you want to talk about is the governing component of the policy and what the board really sees as its vision of literacy for this district, not only today, not only tomorrow, but in 5 to 10 years from now. Because remember, when you're writing policy, not only you're writing it for this current board and administration, but you're writing it for future boards and administrations that should follow us in the footsteps of the great work that we're doing here and now. Did find, when we did a bit of a policy search, that there was one district that stood out, and it's APS, Atlanta Public Schools System. They have it baked into their board policy ID curriculum and design. Really was not able to find any other districts that had a specific literacy policy or have a component of one. Actually, in components that I was able to find in a search, you did have other areas where, for example, Barrow County Schools under BAB, which is School Board Governance, we don't have that policy. They do. They mention literacy as a priority, so their board sets literacy as a priority through that policy. A lot of other areas are in instructional materials. Fulton County mentions it under IFA, and that's under the evaluation and use of instructional materials, which mentions literacy skills. Doesn't really talk about an overarching literacy policy, though. Henry County does that as well under digital literacy from technology. Curriculum and design is another area that we found that other districts are using this. One of the things that we wanted to call up too, and you see on the screen, the board already has a policy section under goals and objectives. Now recall, goals and objectives is really where those strategic priorities that the board will adopt under a strategic plan live. And we set those from the board's governance standard to be immortalized in policy. So you'll see that we mentioned actually currently under our goals and objectives under SP1, the advancement of proficiency in literacy. Of course, numeracy is right there as well and a host of other things, but literacy is currently mentioned under board policy BA. This could be an area that the board considers where an overarching literacy policy, a commitment to literacy now and for the future might live. The other areas you might consider it is in the area of code section, the I section, which is instructional area, when you get into curriculum and design, or instructional components for students. So with that being said, We wanted to give the board, this committee right now, an opportunity to kind of chew on this and just have some open dialogue where we could walk away today with at least 3 overarching commitments to what you think and what you believe and what you would stand behind as would be a quality, literacy-based policy for this school district. Knowing all of the things that we just went through, such as there is current statutory language out there that is driving much of the work we do in this area.
Well, I'll say, Dr. Howard Hall, thank you for bringing this forward. This is a great initiative, and I think certainly falls in line with, our commitment to literacy as our North Star. So just want to thank you publicly for taking the initiative to move this forward. And do you have any comments that you would like to make, since this was kind of your baby bringing it forward?
Yes, we know that when Dr. Watts arrived, what her mantra was, the North Star. Literacy is everything. It's not only the North Star, it's the guiding light. It's even the guiding light to the blind. Literacy. One day, all of us will no longer be around this horseshoe. We'll have another superintendent. But with the work that we're putting in, and since it's now state mandated, that all schools are incorporating the science of reading into their curriculums, it's important to keep it that way. And it's important to have a policy that would drive that the objectives, excuse me, to ensure that our students are working at the highest level and that they are required to, and that the superintendent, whatever superintendent we may have within the next 10 or 15 years, that they will provide a robust curriculum to ensure that we're using scientifically based instruction for our students. We can't lose it, because we just heard all the wonderful things from Dr. Barnes, what they're doing. Everyone is working extremely hard. We have made a significant investment in literacy. We want to continue it and put it in policy. Will ensure that our work will continue even when we're rocking in a rocking chair somewhere, watching the news.
I'll be sitting on a beach. I don't know about you. I will just kind of, I like the APS model of having it under curriculum design.
Yeah.
I think it highlights it. One of the things, I know you highlighted the second paragraph. I really like that last paragraph that really truly defines, because we think of literacy only as, can you read?
Yeah.
And like we
So much more
oversimplify
than that. Yeah.
what literacy is, and we also know that's a challenge for our families when they get the test scores, because they don't understand the complexity of the test scores, right? So I really like diving deeper and including similar language about the complexity and really the full depth and breadth of what literacy means. Ms. Hall.
I read a really disturbing article that most high school children now don't finish a complete book, don't finish a novel. And that, it's almost unbelievable to me, but they were backed by research, so it's true. So anything we can do to place literacy at the center of our children's lives, of our families, I think we'd be making a big statement and impact. What I hope is that we don't get bottlenecked. So it's like we're charging you, Mr. Hediger, with let's move this through and get it done, so that we're not sitting here next year. What about the literacy policy? So whatever we need to do to, come to agreement and get it done, let's do that. And thank you, Dr. Howard Hall.
Dr. Moss? Mr. Moss?
Please. Maestro. Dr. Howard Hall, thank you very much for this. I am so happy to see this. If I could put in parenthesis, I would put, and never see balanced literacy again. But, that's what happened. And we weren't the only school board. There were boards all over the nation got hoodwinked by a curriculum that was not based on the science of reading. And that's why all this legislation started. So I am very happy to see this. And Dr. Howard Hall, thank you.
Yeah, I'll agree with everyone thus far and say thank you. I hope Dr. Howard Hall rubs off on me a little bit since I sit so close to her. I like the specificity as well of the last paragraph. I think it's important to highlight writing. I think we can't think if we can't write. So I support anything that is as specific as possible. Science of reading, the tenets of it, I don't believe will ever change, I pray. The naming might change in decades, who knows, but as specific as we can be about what we're expecting, not just phonics, as many people like to point to, phonemic awareness. I think we can be specific and we can say really what we want to see. Because then if we're highlighting the outcomes and then we're not seeing the outcomes based on the policy language, then at some point someone would, per your reasoning for doing it, a new board could redirect, right? And hopefully they would. So I like this. I appreciate you offering it up. And good luck to you, Mr. Hediger.
Dr. Watts, a lot of our children can't speak well. And it's to the point where I'm wondering, is it because we don't give them the opportunity to speak? Do they have to recite poetry anymore? But we can't just read this and say, "Oh, that sounds good." So, Ms. Burkett, maybe somebody needs to really focus in on what are we doing to help our children learn how to speak confidently.
You've heard me talk about literacy. I have often followed that by saying, read well, speak well, write well. I say all three things because, in my opinion, that is what literacy is. It's a combination of things. I know that our curriculum does have opportunities for all three of those things to happen. And we can promote those and advance those, but it goes back to literacy. Like, we have to provide the opportunities, like you said. And as children are younger, we have to also speak to them because language acquisition actually happens before kids come to school. And we know that there is a word gap that exists for kids that are, spoken to a lot when they're little versus those that don't. And the gap actually starts before they even walk in our doors. And that's why pre-K is so important, because it at least gives us a head start. So I think this is another example of Together We Can. We certainly can take the opportunity at the district level as it relates to curriculum and instruction and enrichment opportunities for kids to read well, write well, and speak well. But I would also say it's a community. Parents have to take their part of it in it as well. And we can definitely reach our goal towards the North Star.
Partnership, like at my church, the children have an opportunity to speak and to act. So churches are a big help, but there need to be other organizations because I've seen some people so afraid to speak they almost faint. I mean, they're scared to death to speak publicly. So whatever we can do, that'll be a big help.
And, well, thank you for bringing that up, Ms. Hall, because I think one of the things that I would love to see in here too is, and I don't know that it's policy, but maybe it is, like encouraging diverse and creative opportunities to embrace literacy in all the ways so it can be through diversity of reading materials. Some kids might want a book, some might want a magazine. What are those, and are those opportunities everywhere? And in the speaking, that can be integrated into any class.
Yeah.
The best public speaking teacher I had was in graduate school, and she was an environmental engineer. And that's not who you would think of but she required us to speak in front of the class, and she marked down everything. To her, the public speaking was just as important as the material. So I think as we talk about culture, as we talk about literacy, looking for ways to be creative and integrate literacy in non-conventional ways is how we kind of build that love of literacy among our students. So,
Yeah, great,
Go
great
forth and do.
content. And remind too that the Georgia Early Literacy Act is as it states. It's early literacy, which we know is incredibly important. You want to front load them for success. But as the kids get older and they get influenced by competing medias, which are always in their head, or writing and communicating in a certain way that is rushed, like a quick text message with emojis, that really significantly impacts your ability to communicate. So having opportunities and encouraging those diverse opportunities for students to engage in those type of activities that improve their abilities to speak confidently, to speak publicly, and to engage in high-level communication will certainly set them for success. And you can certainly do that in policy language, but we will caution, we have to be careful with the shalls and the musts and the mays, because we don't want to create any ministerial type of policy language that is immediately going to set us up for policy violations. However, setting that culture of how we approach our teaching and learning through these types of practices that we're talking about in this area, you can certainly define that in policy and do wonderful things for future generations.
Dr. Howard Hall.
Say this, teaching first grade, I had one child who was very outgoing. They spoke very well, so I actually put on a play for the entire school. I did 2 years. 1 year was the Little Red Hen. Every child had the opportunity to speak, but we're kind of getting away from that because there's so many other requirements that we must put in, the number of hours, and teachers just really don't have that kind of time to do things like that. But that would definitely help with public speaking. That's why I noticed if you watch the plays at Savannah Arts and those students at Garrison, because they have the opportunity, and that's really a great time for public speaking.
Well, I'm just going to give a plug for Charles Ellis. If you have not ever seen Charles Ellis Presents, you need to. I don't know if it's the 4th or 5th graders. They write the entire thing. They perform the entire thing. They build all the sets. They're given a theme of music. When my daughter was there one year, it was Queen. So all the songs were based, the music was, but they created the lyrics. It will just make your heart warm, and it just shows how engaging the students in that non-traditional way can be just so impactful. So, okay, I know we are so far over time. Any closing thoughts? But this has been a great conversation. Thank you to the team. Sorry we kept you here a little bit longer, but we appreciate all of your hard work and your commitment to our students. So with that, we are adjourned.